The Belt and Road is crumbling. Kyrgyzstan explodes in riots as locals furiously attack Chinese workers. An anti-China wave sweeps across Central Asia, leading to mass visa rejections. In Russia, landlords are refusing to rent to Chinese nationals, while protests in Korea shout, "Chinese get out." Despite the temporary truce in the U.S.-China trade war, the corporate exodus is accelerating. Meanwhile, young people in rage and despair choose to lie flat. No marriage, no children. The people say they can no longer survive. In a tragic turn, fishing boats capsize in South Korean waters, leaving fishermen to die without rescue while the CCP launches a blame-shifting crackdown. Welcome to today's episode of the China Files. Here is everything you need to understand about these critical developments. The Belt and Road Initiative is facing a severe reckoning. On November 25th, Kyrgyzstan announced the arrest of the Chinese CEO of Kaimon Resource Group, a gold mining company operating in the northern Kaimon region. The company is accused of polluting water sources, destroying over 14,000 square meters of land, and repeatedly violating industrial safety laws. A Bishkek court ordered the CEO into pre-trial detention by the National Security Committee. This project was considered a cornerstone of China-Kyrgyzstan mining cooperation, but the arrest highlights how anti-China sentiment is boiling over. Violence has erupted repeatedly between locals and Chinese workers. Nationalist groups are even organizing raids to expel illegal Chinese migrants. On November 15, 2025, a massive brawl broke out at a construction site in the Chu region after locals protested that Chinese workers were paid 2 to 3 times more than them. The incident generated over 100,000 discussions on social media in just 24 hours, with calls to boycott Chinese-funded projects spreading like wildfire. A similar wave of anger is sweeping Kazakhstan. The Chinese CEO of another mining company was detained following a chain of grim events. A dispute involving a Chinese truck driver, an assault on a local woman, and the mysterious death of a 37-year-old woman linked to 2 Chinese men. Observers believe Chinese operators have exported domestic habits, cutting corners and ignoring regulations, tarnishing China's image abroad. In Bishkek, home to nearly 40,000 Chinese business people, anxiety is rising. Police have begun sweeping markets and detaining Chinese nationals regardless of visa status. Even those with valid papers face hours of detention and extortion. Public anger isn't just about social incidents. It's fueled by fears of economic penetration and human rights abuses. Kazakhstan has become a hotbed of anti-China sentiment. Early in November, protests erupted over the disappearance of a Kazakh citizen after he entered Xinjiang. Protesters burned Chinese flags and portraits of Xi Jinping. Scholars like He Hen criticize China's cross-border detentions, noting they are often accompanied by total information blackouts. Despite this backlash, Chinese investment continues to flow, but the reception is growing increasingly hostile. A July 17th report by Fudan and Griffith universities revealed that Belt and Road projects hit a record $123.2 billion in the first half of 2025. However, critics argue these projects are flashy, unfeasible, and fail to create local jobs. Transparency International notes that at least 35% of these projects are linked to corruption, while public debt in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan has surged past 40% of GDP. Economist Wang Xiaoluo issued a stark warning in July, noting that China is far from a developed nation. With 700 million people earning under $367 per month, China continues to pour trillions into foreign infrastructure, while its own people struggle. He criticized the lack of transparency in land sale revenues and the absence of proper auditing. Social media users are echoing these concerns, arguing that if even half of that money went into healthcare and education, life for ordinary citizens would improve vastly. Instead, the national treasury is drained. Many projects in Central Asia were motivated by geopolitics rather than economics, leaving host countries with massive debts and China with a financial black hole. The diplomatic claim that China-Russia relations are ironclad contradicts the reality on the ground. This year, Moscow has been described by Chinese expats as full of abnormality and madness. One blogger recounted how a policeman tore up his residence permit just to extort money. He lamented, "Of the 11 years I've lived in Russia, this has been the most insane year." Discrimination is rampant. Students report that Russian landlords frequently refuse to rent to mainland Chinese, citing stereotypes that they leave apartments dirty and damaged. One student noted that 5 landlords hung up immediately upon hearing his nationality. This reality checks the wolf warrior propaganda, which claims a Chinese passport is a pass to safety. Instead, Chinese tourists and workers are running into trouble. In Kazakhstan, train staff reportedly target Chinese passengers for checks. In Kyrgyzstan, up to 600 Chinese visa applications were rejected in a single day following a spike in crimes involving Chinese nationals, including drunk driving and a shocking case where a local woman died after being pressured by 2 Chinese men. The situation is further complicated by the behavior of some Chinese nationals abroad. In Russia, the new visa waiver hasn't improved welcomes. Instead, rude online comments by Chinese men about marrying Russian beauties have sparked ridicule. Worse, internal predation is rising. One blogger noted the most baffling problem is Chinese people scamming other Chinese people with fake job referrals and wage theft. In South Korea, an anti-China wave is surging due to uncivil behavior and illegal activities. Local media report that Chinese nationals are running illegal taxis and charging tourists exorbitant fares. Despite relaxed visa rules, arrests for overstaying are common. Analysts suggest that the brutal economic pressure back home is pushing more citizens to seek opportunities abroad, even illegally, which in turn destroys China's international migration credibility. Global borders are tightening. A migration blogger observed that while Westerners pass easily, Asians, particularly from China, are frequently interrogated in private rooms. In some African countries, Chinese travelers are treated like walking ATMs, forced to pay bribes at every checkpoint. Despite the temporary truce in the U.S.-China trade war, the corporate exodus is speeding up. Companies are fleeing to Vietnam and India, driven by geopolitical rivalry, foreign exchange controls, and rising costs. Since 2025, giants like Nike and Apple have scaled back Chinese production. Vietnam has overtaken China as the top hub for U.S. athletic shoes. Danish entrepreneur Simon Lickenberg, who initially tried to stay, suffered millions in losses due to tariffs. He has since moved production to Vietnam, leaving his Shanghai factories idle and hundreds of Chinese workers laid off. Insiders reveal that General Motors is instructing suppliers to eliminate Chinese components by 2027. China no longer holds a cost advantage. Monthly wages for assembly workers in China range from $600 to $700 compared to $350 in Vietnam. Furthermore, the CCP's requirement to establish party branches within companies has spooked foreign investors, accelerating their exit. The economic impact on Chinese workers is devastating. In Dongguan, a worker lamented that his $700 salary barely covers his mortgage, and with his factory moving, he faces total unemployment. Experts warn that unemployment will hit new highs as factories shift to cheaper countries or replace labor with automation. Research shows that in 2024, 16% of global companies withdrawing from China relocated back to the U.S. and Canada, signaling a reshaping of the global supply chain. The days of China being the world's factory based on cheap labor are ending, leaving a workforce in precarious uncertainty. In the face of this pressure, young people are choosing to lie flat. No marriage, no children. The sentiment is clear. If I have a child, I would be a sinner. A viral post argues that society demands a horse run without feeding it. Average incomes cannot keep up with the cost of living. In 2024, marriage registrations dropped by 20.5% to just 6.6 million. Marriage is now seen as a financial burden rather than a milestone. One mother shared her exhaustion online, regretting having a child she cannot afford to raise properly. Conversely, a DINK, double-income, no-kids couple in Hangzhou shared a twist. They enjoyed years of freedom, but now regret spending their savings, realizing they are too broke to start a family even if they wanted to. The path for an ordinary person is described as a grinder: intense academic pressure, 996 corporate burnout, and the risk of ending up as a food delivery driver by age 35. This deep pessimism is defining a generation.
Finally, a tragedy at sea highlights the government's negligence. A string of Liaoning fishing boats capsized in South Korean waters. Instead of organizing a rescue, a bureau-level official in Yingkou allegedly instructed the boat owner not to call the police to avoid a scandal.
Families of the missing say the vessels were unsafe and overloaded. Of the 11 crew members who went overboard in one incident, only 2 survived. The families are furious that a local official tried to cover the sky with one hand while lives were lost. Instead of fixing management failures, authorities responded with a rectification campaign, banning boats from sailing and imposing heavy fines, pushing fishermen further into debt. When 300 fishermen gathered to ask for help, they were met with police force. It is a grim reminder that for many, the priority is stability maintenance, not saving lives. This campaign of blame shifting targets struggling boat owners while leaving corruption networks untouched. We'd love to hear your perspective on these unfolding crises. Leave a comment below. If you found this update from the China Files helpful, please like and subscribe. Your support keeps us going. Thank you for watching.